I had been cooking since 4 in the morning, preparing everything for Amanda's 40th birthday. My hands ached from chopping, stirring, and baking her favorite foods in the kitchen of the house my late husband Frank and I had built. When the guests arrived, I watched silently as Amanda acted like the perfect hostess in my home. Then, when I tried to take a seat at my own dining table, she towered over me with cold eyes. "Get out of here! I didn't invite you," she growled, humiliating me in front of everyone. My name is Jo, and at 68 years old, I never imagined I'd be standing in my own home feeling like an unwelcome stranger. 3 years ago, I lost my husband Frank, after 45 beautiful years together. We built this house with our own hands 40 years ago, when we were young and full of dreams. Every nail, every board, every decision was made together. It was our forever home, the place we raised our son David, the place Frank took his last breath. David is 42 now, our only child. 5 years ago, he married Amanda, a beautiful and ambitious woman 8 years his junior. I remember their wedding day, how happy David looked, how confident Amanda seemed in her flowing white gown. I thought she was perfect for him, despite noticing her sometimes controlling nature. Frank had whispered to me during their first dance, "She knows what she wants. That one." If only I had realized what she truly wanted. After Frank passed away, the house felt impossibly large and quiet. Every corner held memories that brought both comfort and pain. I tried to establish new routines, joined a book club, volunteered at the local library, anything to fill the emptiness Frank left behind. Then, about 2 years ago, David called with news that their house had developed serious plumbing issues. The repairs would take weeks. "Mom," he said, voice hesitant, "I know this is a lot to ask, but could Amanda and I stay with you until the work is done? We'd be out of your hair as soon as possible." I was overjoyed at the prospect of having family in the house again. "Of course. There's plenty of room. Stay as long as you need." They moved into the guest bedroom with 2 suitcases each. That was 2 years ago. Those suitcases multiplied into dressers full of clothes, closets stuffed with their belongings, and gradually, they took over more spaces in the house without ever discussing when they might leave. First, it was just the guest room. Then Amanda needed a home office, so they took over the small den where Frank used to read. Then they needed storage space, so half the garage filled with their boxes. I tried not to mind. Having them there meant the house didn't feel so empty anymore. I could hear footsteps upstairs, voices in the kitchen, signs of life that helped ease my loneliness. But Amanda began making changes without asking. Family photos disappeared from walls, replaced with modern art pieces I didn't understand. Furniture was rearranged when I was out grocery shopping. My comfortable old armchair that Frank gave me for our 25th anniversary was suddenly in the basement because it didn't match the aesthetic. "Mom, don't you think the place looks better?" David would ask, gesturing to Amanda's changes. It needed updating. I would nod and smile, not wanting to seem difficult or ungrateful for their company. After all, they were family. I told myself that accommodating them was what family did for each other. Maybe Amanda just needed to feel at home here, and I should be more flexible. There were so many little moments that made me uncomfortable. Finding my grandmother's silver serving spoons in the donation pile because Amanda thought they were tarnished beyond saving. Discovering she'd given away my collection of Christmas ornaments, including the ones David made as a child, because she preferred a color-coordinated tree. Each time I mentioned these things to David, he would sigh and say, "Mom, Amanda is trying to help modernize things. Can't you be more flexible?" As weeks turned into months, I found myself retreating to my bedroom more often, the only space that remained truly mine. I'd catch Amanda giving my room calculating looks, mentioning how it would make such a lovely guest suite with different paint. I pretended not to hear these comments, not wanting to cause tension. Despite everything, I still hoped we could become close. I wanted a relationship with my daughter-in-law, wanted to be included in their lives. Whenever Amanda was cold or dismissive, I told myself she was just under stress from work or adjusting to living with her mother-in-law. I made excuses for her behavior because admitting the truth hurt too much. When I learned Amanda's 40th birthday was approaching, I saw my opportunity. A milestone birthday celebration could be the perfect way to show her how much I valued her, how welcome she was in our family. I approached David when Amanda was at work. "I want to throw Amanda a surprise birthday party," I told him, excited by the idea. "Something special, here at the house. Could you help me with the guest list and keeping her in the dark about it?" David's face lit up. "Mom, that's fantastic. Amanda loves being the center of attention. She's been hinting about wanting a big celebration." For the next few weeks, I poured my heart into planning the perfect party. I used a significant portion of my savings to buy expensive ingredients, elegant decorations, and thoughtful gifts I hoped would please her. David provided a list of her friends and family members to invite. I sent handwritten invitations, coordinated RSVPs, planned a menu featuring all of Amanda's favorite foods. The day before the party, I spent hours cleaning the house until it sparkled. I arranged flowers in every room, hung a beautiful banner in the dining room, and prepared as much food as possible in advance. That night, I went to bed feeling genuinely hopeful that this grand gesture would finally earn Amanda's respect and affection. The morning of the party, I woke at 4 to begin cooking. My arthritis flared painfully as I chopped vegetables, prepared appetizers, and baked Amanda's favorite lemon cake with buttercream frosting. I worked tirelessly, wanting everything to be perfect. Around 9, I heard Amanda on the phone in the living room. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but her voice carried clearly through the house. "I know, Jen. It's ridiculous. The old lady thinks she's throwing me some big surprise party today." As if I didn't know all along. Amanda's laugh was cold, nothing like the warm chuckle she used around David. "She's probably in there now, slaving away over food nobody wants. Don't worry, I'll handle it. This is my birthday, and I'm not letting her take over. It's about time we clarified who really runs this house." I froze in the kitchen, wooden spoon suspended over the pot of homemade pasta sauce I'd been stirring. The words stung like physical blows. I considered confronting her or canceling the whole event, but I had invited nearly 30 people. The food was prepared. Everything was ready. And maybe, just maybe, when Amanda saw how beautiful everything was, she might have a change of heart. So I kept working, trying to ignore the ache in my chest that had nothing to do with physical exertion. As I put the finishing touches on the birthday cake, I still clung to a shred of hope that today could mark a new beginning for our relationship. Little did I know, it would indeed mark a new beginning, but not in the way I had imagined. The first guests arrived promptly at 3 in the afternoon. I had just finished arranging the appetizer trays in the dining room when the doorbell rang. Before I could reach the door, Amanda swept past me, perfectly dressed in a new blue dress I'd never seen before. "I've got it," she called over her shoulder dismissively. I retreated to the kitchen, listening as she greeted her college friends with enthusiasm. "Welcome to our home. I'm so glad you could make it." Our home. The words bothered me, but I pushed the feeling aside. This was her day, after all. I busied myself with last-minute preparations, waiting for her to introduce me to her friends. Instead, when I finally emerged from the kitchen, I found myself awkwardly hovering at the edge of conversations, invisible until Amanda noticed me. "Oh, this is David's mother, Jo. She lives with us," Amanda explained to her friends with the slightest emphasis on the last 3 words. Not "this is Jo, who graciously lets us stay in her home," or even "this is my mother-in-law, Jo, whose house this is." No, according to Amanda, I lived with them. As more guests arrived, I realized I didn't recognize most of them. None of my friends were invited, despite the list I'd given David. The party I had planned and paid for was filled with strangers who looked at me with polite confusion, clearly wondering why this older woman was hovering around the edges of Amanda's celebration. When I tried to help serve the food I'd spent hours preparing, Amanda intercepted me with a tight smile. "The caterers will handle that," she said loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. Caterers? There were no caterers. I had prepared everything myself. I noticed something else troubling. The special photo collage I'd created, featuring pictures of Amanda with David and our family over the years, had been mostly dismantled. Only a few photos remained, rearranged among Amanda's professional headshots and travel photos I'd never seen before. As I made my way through the crowded living room, I overheard Amanda speaking to an older couple who must have been her parents. "We're thinking of renovating the master bedroom next," she was saying enthusiastically, "and converting the second bedroom into a proper home office. This place has good bones, but it needs to be brought into this century." The second bedroom was my bedroom, the only space in the house that remained truly mine. I felt a cold sensation spreading through my chest. They were planning to take my bedroom? Where did they expect me to go? Whenever I tried to join conversations, I found myself quickly interrupted or politely, but firmly excluded. Amanda would sweep in with, "Oh, Joe was just helping out with the food," before steering the conversation elsewhere. David remained oblivious to my increasing discomfort, drinking beer with his friends in the corner of the living room. One of Amanda's friends, a kind-faced woman named Tina, approached me as I adjusted the flower arrangement on the side table. "You have a lovely home," she commented. "Have you lived here long?" "Thank you," I responded, grateful for the acknowledgement. "My late husband and I built this house 40 years ago. We raised David here." Tina looked confused. "Oh, I thought this was Amanda and David's place." Amanda talked about all the renovations she's been doing, so I assumed. Before I could respond, Amanda materialized beside us, linking her arm through Tina's. "Come see the backyard. I've been telling you about those amazing rose bushes." As she led Tina away, she shot me a warning glance over her shoulder. The pattern continued throughout the afternoon. I became increasingly invisible in my own home, relegated to the background like an unwanted piece of furniture Amanda hadn't managed to replace yet. Eventually, I retreated to the kitchen to bring out the cake I'd baked from scratch, a 3-tiered lemon confection with hand-piped decorations that had taken me hours. I carefully carried it to the dining room where guests had gathered. "Here's the birthday cake," I announced, trying to inject some enthusiasm into my voice despite my growing dismay. Amanda rushed forward, taking the cake from my hands. "Here it is." "I slaved over this all day," she announced to appreciative murmurs from the guests. "An old family recipe, but I added my own special touch." I stood frozen, as Amanda described in detail how she had made the very cake I'd spent hours creating. David caught my eye from across the room and gave me a small shrug, as if to say, "Just let her have this." By the time dinner was served, I was emotionally exhausted. I'd spent the entire day being systematically erased from my own home, my contributions attributed to Amanda or invisible caterers. I had planned to sit at my own dining table, the beautiful oak piece that had been a wedding gift from my parents 45 years ago. But when I entered the dining room, I found every seat taken or marked with a place card. There was no place for me. I waited patiently, thinking perhaps someone would notice and make room. After several minutes, I noticed a guest getting up, apparently finished with their meal. I approached the newly vacant chair, eager to finally sit and perhaps enjoy some of the food I'd prepared. As I pulled out the chair, Amanda's voice cut through the dinner conversation. "That seat is reserved for Jessica, who's in the bathroom," she announced loudly. "She'll be right back." All eyes turned to me. I stood there, hand still on the back of the chair, feeling the hot flush of embarrassment spread across my face. I hadn't seen any Jessica at the party, and the place setting had been clearly used. But I couldn't challenge Amanda without creating a scene. "Of course," I murmured, backing away from the table. "I'll just check on things in the kitchen." The looks of pity from some guests were almost worse than Amanda's cold dismissal. I hurried from the dining room, my vision blurring with unshed tears. In my own home, at my own table, I had been publicly humiliated and excluded from the celebration I had created. In the kitchen, I busied myself washing dishes that didn't need washing, trying to regain my composure. The sounds of laughter and conversation drifted in from the dining room, a painful reminder of my exclusion. I wiped my hands on a dishcloth, then pressed the cool, damp fabric against my hot cheeks. I wouldn't cry. I refused to let Amanda's cruelty reduce me to tears. "Mom, what are you doing in here?" I turned to find David standing in the doorway, a half-empty beer bottle dangling from his fingers. His expression was a mixture of confusion and impatience. "Just tidying up a bit," I said, forcing a smile. "There's a lot to clean." "Why aren't you out there with everyone?" he asked. Though I suspected he already knew the answer. "There wasn't a place for me at the table," I said quietly, not wanting to accuse his wife directly. Amanda said the empty seat was reserved. David sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Mom, can't you just let Amanda have her day? Why do you always need attention?" His words hit me like a physical blow. Always need attention? When had I ever demanded the spotlight? All I'd wanted was a place at the table in my own home, after cooking for hours and spending my savings on this party. "David," I said, my voice shaking slightly, "I spent thousands of dollars on this party. I cooked all the food. I sent the invitations. All I wanted was to be included." "See? This is exactly what I mean," he said, his voice rising slightly. "It's Amanda's birthday, but somehow you're making it all about you and how much you did. Can't you just be happy for her without keeping score?" In that moment, I hardly recognized my son. Where was the kind, thoughtful boy I had raised? The child who once made me breakfast in bed when I was sick, who wrote me poems on Mother's Day. How had he transformed into this dismissive man who couldn't see what was happening right in front of him? "I should get back," David muttered, already turning away. "Try to relax, Mom. It's just a party." As he left, memories flooded back of all the small indignities I'd endured over the past 2 years. Amanda borrowing my pearl necklace, the one Frank had given me for our 30th anniversary, and then claiming she must have misplaced it when I asked for its return. The day I came home to find photographs of Frank missing from my nightstand, only to discover them in the trash because Amanda thought they were bringing negative energy into the house. The constant criticisms of my cooking, my clothes, my opinions, always delivered with a smile when David was present. There was the time I found Frank's collection of first edition mystery novels boxed up in the garage. Amanda explaining she needed the bookshelf space for her yoga trophies. Or when she accidentally donated my hand-knitted Christmas stockings, including the one I'd made for David when he was born, because they were outdated. Even more troubling were the financial discrepancies I'd begun noticing but had dismissed. A bank statement showing a withdrawal I hadn't made. Missing checkbooks I thought I'd misplaced. Mail that seemed to disappear before I could open it. I had attributed these issues to my own forgetfulness, not wanting to believe something more sinister might be happening. Drawing a deep breath, I decided to rejoin the party with as much dignity as I could muster. This was still my home. I wouldn't be driven into hiding in my own kitchen. I arranged the dessert plates I'd prepared on a tray and carried them out to the living room where some guests had migrated after dinner. In the living room, I noticed a pile of opened gifts on the coffee table. Among them were the expensive silver earrings and silk scarf I had purchased for Amanda. The gift tags had been removed, and Amanda was modeling the scarf for her friends. "They're from Paris," I heard her say. I mentioned them to David last month. No acknowledgement that these gifts had come from me. No recognition of my generosity. It was as if I simply didn't exist in the narrative of this party except as an inconvenient presence to be managed or ignored. I circulated with my tray of desserts, offering them to guests who thanked me with varying degrees of warmth. Some seemed to sense the underlying tension and offered sympathetic smiles. Others treated me like the hired help, taking plates without acknowledgement. Finally, I decided to make one last attempt to join the celebration properly. The dinner appeared to be winding down, with several guests having moved to other rooms. Surely now I could find a place at my own table to enjoy some of the food I'd prepared. I approached cautiously, noticing an empty chair at the far end of the table. No plate, no place setting, but definitely vacant. I pulled it out quietly, planning to simply observe the remaining dinner guests, if nothing else. The moment I began to lower myself into the seat, I felt the temperature of the room drop. Conversations halted mid-sentence. Forks paused halfway to mouths. Every eye turned toward me, then shifted to Amanda. who was rising from her place at the head of the table, her face contorted with barely contained rage. "Get out of here! I didn't invite you," she growled, her voice unnaturally loud in the sudden silence. The room froze. 20 pairs of eyes fixed on me, expressions ranging from shock to embarrassment to morbid curiosity. My son's face had gone pale, but he remained silent, offering neither defense nor objection to his wife's outburst. I felt a wave of dizziness wash over me. The humiliation was absolute, public, and deliberate. In my own home, at my own table, I had been told I was unwelcome. And my son, my only child, sat in frozen silence. The silence following Amanda's outburst seemed to stretch for an eternity. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears, feel the heat of shame burning my cheeks. For a moment, I considered apologizing, retreating to my room like a scolded child. It would be easier, certainly, less confrontational. But something inside me, some long-dormant spark of self-respect, refused to be extinguished. Slowly, deliberately, I stood up straight. My arthritic hands gripped the back of the chair, not for support, but to stop them from trembling with anger. I looked around the table at the guests, many of whom were now studying their plates intently, unwilling to meet my eyes. I looked at David, silently pleading with him to say something, anything, in my defense. But he merely stared back, his expression a mixture of embarrassment and resignation. He would not be coming to my rescue. Amanda remained standing, her posture triumphant, a slight smirk playing at the corners of her mouth. She thought she had won. She thought I would slink away, humiliated and defeated. Without a word, I turned and walked toward the front door. I could feel Amanda's smug satisfaction radiating from behind me. I heard someone whisper, "Poor old lady," and another voice murmuring, "So uncomfortable." As I approached the door, a flood of memories washed over me. Frank and I, standing in this very spot 40 years ago, keys in hand, giddy with excitement about our new home. The countless holiday gatherings around that dining table, laughter filling every corner of the room. David taking his first steps across this living room floor, Frank and I cheering him on. Frank's final days in our bedroom upstairs, holding my hand and making me promise to keep living. Jojo, really living. And then other, more recent memories surfaced. Amanda rifling through my dresser drawers when she thought I was out. Mail addressed to me that I never saw. The time I noticed my checkbook had moved from its usual place, and several checks were missing. Strange charges on my credit card statement. The safety deposit box key that disappeared, then mysteriously reappeared in a different location. I paused at the door, my hand on the knob. I had been blind, willfully ignoring the signs because facing the truth was too painful. But I couldn't ignore it any longer. Not after this. Instead of opening the door, I reached for my purse hanging on the coat rack. From inside, I removed a manila folder I had placed there earlier that day, intending to visit the bank after the party. A folder containing documents I had been gathering for weeks, ever since I discovered the first unauthorized withdrawal from my retirement account. I turned back to face the dining room. The guests were watching me with curious expressions, probably expecting a dramatic exit. Amanda's smirk faltered slightly when she saw I hadn't left. "I think," I said, my voice surprisingly steady, "that before I go, there's something everyone should know." I opened the folder and removed a stack of bank statements. "Amanda, would you care to explain why $85,000 has disappeared from my retirement accounts over the past 6 months? Or why your signature appears on withdrawal slips I never authorized?" The room went completely still. Amanda's face drained of color. David stood up so quickly his chair tipped backward, crashing to the floor. "Mom, what are you talking about?" he demanded. I approached the table again, this time with purpose. I placed the bank statements on the table, spreading them out so everyone could see. "I'm talking about systematic theft, David. I've been working with the bank's fraud department and a private investigator for the past month. We have security footage of Amanda entering my bedroom when I'm not home, taking financial documents from my desk." "That's ridiculous," Amanda sputtered, but her voice lacked conviction. She's confused. She's getting old. She probably authorized these withdrawals and forgot. I pulled out more papers from the folder. These are copies of checks with forged signatures. The bank's handwriting expert has confirmed they weren't signed by me. And here, I said, extracting a small USB drive, is security camera footage from the bank showing Amanda withdrawing money using my identification. Amanda's parents had risen from their seats, horror etched on their faces as they looked at their daughter. "Amanda?" her father questioned, his voice barely above a whisper. "She's lying!" Amanda shrieked. But panic had replaced confidence in her eyes. "She's trying to ruin my birthday because she's jealous and bitter." I turned to David, whose face had gone ashen. "Ask her, David. Ask your wife if she's been stealing from me." David stared at Amanda, searching her face. "Is this true? Have you been taking Mom's money?" Amanda's composure cracked entirely. Tears spilled down her cheeks, ruining her careful makeup. "She was going to leave everything to charity anyway," she cried. "I heard her talking to her lawyer friend. After everything we've done for her, living here, taking care of her, she was going to leave it all to strangers." A collective gasp rose from the guests. I shook my head slowly. "That's not true, Amanda. I was updating my will to leave this house to you and David. The charity donation was a small foundation for arthritis research, in Frank's memory." I looked around at the shocked faces. "I discovered the theft weeks ago. I planned this party partly to see if Amanda would show any remorse, any hint of guilt for what she was doing. Instead, she took credit for my work, humiliated me in my own home, and continued her plan to push me out." Amanda's face twisted with rage. "You set me up. You planned all this to embarrass me in front of everyone." "No, Amanda," I said calmly. "You did that all by yourself." I reached into the folder one last time and removed a small audio recorder. "I also have this," I said, pressing the play button. Amanda's voice filled the room, crystal clear. "I just need another 6 months, Tara. By then I'll have enough documentation to have her declared incompetent. David won't fight it. He always takes my side. We'll get power of attorney, access to everything. The old bat won't know what hit her." The recording continued, detailing Amanda's plans to move me to a cheap nursing home while they sold my house and used the proceeds to buy a vacation property. As the recording ended, the silence in the room was absolute. Amanda stood frozen, all pretense abandoned. David looked physically ill, swaying slightly on his feet. "That was recorded last week," I explained quietly. "On a nanny cam I installed after I found my checkbook had been tampered with again." I closed the folder. "I may be old, Amanda, but I'm far from incompetent." The stunned silence that followed seemed to stretch on indefinitely. Amanda stood rigid, her perfectly manicured nails digging into her palms. David had sunk back into his chair, head in his hands. The guests exchanged uncomfortable glances, clearly wishing they could evaporate from this increasingly distressing scene. "I think," said one of Amanda's friends, rising quickly, "that we should probably go. This seems like a family matter." That broke the spell. Guests began standing, mumbling awkward excuses, gathering purses and jackets. Amanda remained frozen, watching her carefully orchestrated birthday celebration disintegrate. "Actually," I said firmly, "I would appreciate it if everyone, except immediate family, would give us some privacy. Thank you all for coming." The exodus was swift and uncomfortable. As guests filed past me toward the door, several offered quiet words of support or apologetic looks. Amanda's parents approached me last, her father's face grave, her mother's streaked with tears. "Joe," her father said quietly, "we had no idea. We're so sorry." I nodded acknowledgement but said nothing. Their daughter's behavior wasn't their fault, but I wasn't ready to offer absolution either. They left with backward glances at Amanda, who refused to meet their eyes. When the front door closed behind the last guest, only David, Amanda, and I remained in the dining room. The beautiful party setup now seemed grotesque, a mockery of celebration surrounding our family crisis. Amanda recovered her voice first, her tone accusatory. I can't believe you would humiliate me like this on my birthday. In front of everyone we know. Humiliate you? I echoed incredulously. After what you've done? David raised his head, his expression haunted. Mom, are you absolutely sure about this? Could there be some mistake? I approached the table again, spreading out the documents. See for yourself, David. Account statements showing withdrawals I never made. Forged signatures that don't match mine. Security footage from the bank. It's all here. David studied the papers, his face growing increasingly troubled. These are from your retirement accounts, the ones Dad set up. Yes, I confirmed. $85,000 so far. The money your father worked 60-hour weeks to save. The money meant to support me for the rest of my life. David turned to Amanda, who had switched tactics, her eyes now brimming with calculated tears. David, you can't honestly believe I would do something like this. Your mother has never liked me. This is her way of trying to come between us. The evidence is right there, I said calmly. The bank has confirmed it. The police have been notified. This isn't about liking or not liking you, Amanda. This is about theft. Elder financial abuse, to be precise. Elder abuse? Amanda scoffed. Don't be so dramatic. We live here. We take care of this place, and you. If anything, you should be paying us. Amanda, David said sharply, surprising both of us. Stop talking, please. He turned to me. Mom, why didn't you come to me when you first suspected something? I gave him a sad smile. Would you have believed me? Over the past 2 years, whenever I've raised concerns about anything Amanda has done, you've dismissed me. You've told me I'm being difficult, inflexible, stuck in the past. David winced at the truth in my words. I would have listened about something this serious. The way you listened just now, when your wife told me to get out of my own house, at my own table. You said nothing, David. Nothing. Amanda, seeing David's resolve wavering, played her final card. I did it for us, David. For our future. Your mother is sitting on all this wealth, this big house, while we've been struggling. She wasn't going to help us. I heard her on the phone with Nancy, saying she was changing her will to leave everything to charity. I shook my head. That's simply not true. I was updating my will to leave this house to both of you. The only charity donation was a small amount to arthritis research in your father's memory. She's lying, Amanda insisted, reaching for David's hand. Why would I need to steal money if she was planning to leave us everything? Because you wanted it now, I replied steadily. And you wanted control. It wasn't enough to wait. You wanted everything immediately, on your terms. David pulled his hand away from Amanda's, staring at her with new eyes. Tell me the truth, he demanded. Did you take my mother's money? Amanda's facade finally crumbled under the weight of irrefutable evidence and David's direct question. Fine. Yes, I took the money. But can you blame me? We've been living in limbo for 2 years, stuck in this outdated house with your mother watching our every move. We deserve our own place, our own life. By stealing my retirement funds? I asked. By planning to have me declared incompetent? Amanda's eyes widened in shock. She hadn't realized I'd heard that particular conversation. That was just talk. I was frustrated. It seems very specific for just talk, David remarked coldly. Detailed plans about power of attorney, nursing homes, selling the house? You don't understand the pressure I've been under, Amanda cried. Living with your mother, always feeling judged, never having our own space. We invited ourselves here, Amanda, David reminded her. Mom welcomed us when our house had problems. We never left. We never even discussed leaving. Because she needs us, Amanda insisted. She can't manage this big house alone. We're doing her a favor by being here. I'd heard enough. I've managed this house for 3 years since Frank died. Before you moved in, I was active in my community, had friends over regularly, traveled to visit my sister in Colorado twice a year. Since you arrived, I've become increasingly isolated. My friends stopped coming because they felt unwelcome. I stopped traveling because things mysteriously disappeared when I was gone. David looked stricken. Mom, I had no idea. You didn't want to see it, I said simply. It was easier to believe I was the problem than to confront the truth about your wife. Amanda's desperation grew as she saw her carefully constructed narrative unraveling. What about all I've done for this place? The decorating, the organizing, the modernizing. This house was stuck in the 1980s before I came along. I never asked for those changes. You made them without my input or permission. You removed my family photos, my keepsakes, my memories, and replaced them with what you wanted. I straightened my shoulders. This is my house, Amanda. I own it outright. Your name is not on any documentation. Amanda looked to David for support, but found none. David? Are you going to let her talk to me this way? After everything I've done for your family? David stood up, his expression resolute. What exactly have you done for my family, Amanda? Stolen from my mother? Planned to have her declared incompetent? Humiliated her in her own home? I built a life for us here, Amanda shouted. I made this place livable. It was already a home, David replied quietly. A loving one. I just couldn't see what was happening. Amanda's tactics shifted again, her voice turning threatening. If you side with her on this, we're done, David. I'll take you for everything in a divorce. I reached into my folder one last time. Before you make threats, Amanda, you should know I have an appointment with the district attorney tomorrow morning. Elder financial abuse is taken very seriously in this state. It carries potential criminal charges, not just civil penalties. Amanda blanched. You wouldn't press charges against your own daughter-in-law. I've already filed a police report, I said firmly. The decision to pursue criminal charges isn't entirely up to me now, but I'm prepared to testify if necessary. David looked at me with newfound respect. What do you want to happen here, Mom? I considered the question carefully. Despite everything, I didn't want to destroy my son's marriage if there was any chance of redemption. But I also refused to remain vulnerable to Amanda's schemes. I want my money back, with interest, I said decisively. I want acknowledgement of what was done, and I want respect in my own home. I paused, then added the final piece. David, I've already made arrangements to move into a senior apartment complex near Nancy. The deposit is paid. I can move next week. You're leaving? David asked, sounding surprised and slightly alarmed. This is your home. You shouldn't have to leave. I nodded. Yes, this is my home. And I'm offering you a choice, David. Amanda can leave tonight, and you can stay here while she finds other accommodations. Or you can choose to stay with Amanda. In which case, you'll both need to find somewhere else to live by the end of the month. Amanda's mouth fell open. You can't just throw us out. Actually, I can. There's no lease agreement. You've been guests in my home, not tenants. I turned to my son. David, I love you. You're my only child, and nothing will change that. But I won't be disrespected, stolen from, or manipulated any longer. You need to decide where you stand. David looked from me to Amanda and back again, the weight of the decision visible in his expression. Finally, he turned to Amanda. I think you should pack what you need for tonight and go to your parents' house, he said quietly. We can talk tomorrow when things are calmer. Amanda stared at him in disbelief. You're choosing her over me? Your own wife? I'm choosing what's right, David replied firmly. Mom deserves justice, and you and I have a lot to discuss before we can move forward. If we can move forward at all. Amanda's face contorted with fury. Fine, if that's how you want it, but don't think this is over. She stormed out of the dining room toward the stairs, presumably to pack her things. David and I stood in silence for a long moment after she left. I'm so sorry, Mom, he finally said, his voice breaking. I had no idea. I should have seen what was happening. Yes, you should have, I agreed, not quite ready to absolve him completely. But what matters now is what you do next. David nodded, accepting the responsibility. I'll make this right. Somehow, from upstairs came the sounds of drawers slamming and angry muttering. Amanda was packing, but this confrontation was far from over. Yet, for the first time in years, I felt something I had almost forgotten. the quiet strength of standing up for myself, of reclaiming what was rightfully mine. Not just my home or my money, but my dignity. The next few hours passed in a blur of tense activity. Amanda packed several suitcases, slamming doors and making as much noise as possible. David called her parents to explain the situation and ensure she would have somewhere to go. I sat at my kitchen table, hands wrapped around a cup of tea gone cold, trying to process the events of the day. When Amanda finally came downstairs, dragging 2 large suitcases, her face was a mask of cold fury. David met her in the foyer, offering to help with her bags. "Don't bother," she snapped, jerking away from him. "I'll send for the rest of my things." "Amanda," David said, his voice tired but firm. "We need to talk about returning my mother's money." Amanda laughed, a brittle sound without humor. "Good luck proving anything in court. It will be my word against hers. Who do you think a jury will believe? A confused old woman or me?" I joined them in the foyer, still holding my cup of tea. "The bank has already confirmed the forgeries, Amanda. And there's the security footage. This isn't something you can talk your way out of." She turned her glare on me. "This house should have been ours already. David is an only child. We've been living here, maintaining it, improving it. You're just being selfish." "It's not selfish to want to control my own property and finances," I replied calmly, "or to expect basic respect." Amanda hoisted her designer handbag onto her shoulder. "This isn't over. Not by a long shot." "Actually," I said, setting down my teacup on the entryway table, "it is over. Your choice now is whether it ends with just the return of my money or with criminal charges." "Are you threatening me?" Amanda demanded. "I'm stating facts. Elder financial abuse is a crime in this state. The evidence is clear. I've already spoken with the police and the district attorney's office." David stepped forward. "Mom has agreed not to press charges if you return the money, Amanda. That's more than fair considering what you've done." Amanda's eyes narrowed. "And if I don't have $85,000 just sitting around, did you think of that?" "We have savings," David pointed out. "And investments. The money you took has to be somewhere." "Those are our joint assets," Amanda protested. "You'd raid our accounts to pay her back?" "They were my mother's assets before you stole them," David replied firmly. "This isn't negotiable, Amanda." I could see the calculations running behind Amanda's eyes. She was cornered, and she knew it. Finally, she nodded curtly. "Fine, I'll transfer the money back. But don't expect anything else from me. Ever." "I never expected theft and betrayal," I said quietly. "So that's actually an improvement." Amanda gave me one last venomous look before turning to David. "Are you coming with me or staying with Mommy?" David squared his shoulders. "I'm staying here tonight. We can talk tomorrow when you've calmed down." "If you stay here tonight, don't bother coming at all," Amanda threatened. "Make your choice now, David. Her or me." I watched my son's face, seeing the conflict there. Despite everything that had happened, this was still his wife, the woman he had chosen to build a life with. But I also saw the moment when certainty replaced doubt in his eyes. "That's not a fair choice, Amanda. But if you're forcing it, then I choose what's right. I choose not to enable theft and elder abuse. I choose to stand with my mother." Amanda's face flushed red. "You'll regret this. I'll make sure of it." She yanked open the front door and struggled through it with her suitcases, refusing David's offer of help. We watched through the window as she loaded her bags into her car and drove away, tires screeching against the pavement. When she was gone, David turned to me, looking utterly drained. "I'm so sorry, Mom. For everything. For not seeing what was happening. For not standing up for you. For bringing her into your life. She's your wife," I said simply. "You loved her. Love makes us blind sometimes. That's no excuse." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so like his father's that it made my heart ache. "What happens now?" I moved to the living room and sat down heavily on the couch, feeling every one of my 68 years. Now we clean up from this disastrous party. Tomorrow I meet with the district attorney, and you need to talk to Amanda about returning my money. and then we figure out where we go from here. David sat beside me. Were you serious about moving out? This is your home, Mom. You shouldn't have to leave because of what Amanda did. I was serious about making arrangements, yes. I put down a deposit on an apartment in that new senior complex near the library, but I haven't decided for certain. I looked around the living room, at the home Frank and I had built together, the memories embedded in every corner. This house has been my sanctuary for 40 years, but lately, it's felt more like a battlefield. It doesn't have to be that way, David insisted. Amanda can move out permanently. I can find my own place. You should stay here, where you belong. I patted his hand. Let's not make any permanent decisions tonight. We're both exhausted. David nodded, then asked hesitantly, do you think there's any way forward for Amanda and me? After what she's done? I considered the question carefully. That depends on whether she takes responsibility for her actions and makes genuine amends, and whether you can truly forgive her. Not just say the words, but actually move past this betrayal. I don't know if I can, David admitted. When I heard that recording, when I saw those bank statements, it was like seeing a stranger. Not the woman I married. People can surprise us, I said, thinking of how I'd surprised myself today by finding the courage to stand up to Amanda. Sometimes for the worse, but sometimes for the better too. We sat in silence for a moment, the wreckage of the party surrounding us, gifts torn open and discarded, food congealing on plates, the birthday banner hanging crookedly from one end where it had come loose in Amanda's dramatic exit. I need to ask you something, Mom, David said finally, and I need the absolute truth. Of course. Was Amanda right about anything? Have you felt burdened by us living here? Have we been taking advantage of your generosity without realizing it? I considered my answer carefully. Having you here hasn't been a burden. I've treasured the time with you. But yes, Amanda gradually took over my home in ways that made me uncomfortable. Removing my photos, rearranging furniture, criticizing my belongings, making me feel like a guest in my own house. And you enabled it, David. Every time I objected, you told me to be more flexible, more modern, less stuck in the past. David hung his head. I was wrong. So wrong. The question now, I continued gently, is what you're going to do with that knowledge going forward. David looked up, his expression resolute. I'm going to make things right. With you first, and then, I don't know. I need to think about my marriage, about whether there's anything left to salvage. I nodded, not envying him the difficult conversations and decisions ahead. Whatever happens, David, I love you. That won't change. I love you too, Mom. He stood up, looking around at the mess. Let's clean this up. Together. As we began putting away food and gathering trash, I felt a strange sense of peace settling over me. The confrontation had been painful, the revelations shocking. But there was also relief in having the truth finally exposed, in reclaiming my voice and my home. For the first time in years, I felt like Joe again, not just David's mother or Amanda's inconvenient mother-in-law. I had stood my ground, protected what was mine, and perhaps most importantly, helped my son see the truth he had been avoiding. Whatever came next would be challenging, but I would face it with the same strength and dignity I had found today. As I washed dishes side by side with my son, I realized that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is not to accommodate their bad behavior, but to hold them accountable for it. Sometimes true love requires difficult truths and firm boundaries. It had taken me 68 years and a disastrous birthday party to learn that lesson, but I wouldn't forget it again. 1 year later, I stood in my garden, clipping roses for the dining table. The summer air was heavy with their sweet scent, mingling with the earthy smell of the tomato plants Frank had always insisted on growing. I had continued the tradition after his death, finding comfort in the familiar rhythm of planting, tending, harvesting. So much had changed in the year since Amanda's 40th birthday disaster. The most visible change was my living situation. I had moved into the renovated guest house at the back of my property, a charming cottage-style dwelling that had once been Frank's workshop. With David's help and a contractor's expertise, we had transformed it into a perfect space for me. One bedroom, an accessible bathroom, a cozy living room, and a kitchen just the right size for cooking for one or two. The main house, my home of 40 years, was now rented to a lovely young family with two small children. Their lease agreement included maintenance of the main garden, but I had kept the small plot outside my guest house for myself. I could hear their children's laughter drifting across the yard as I gathered my roses, a sound that brought me unexpected joy. The aftermath of Amanda's birthday had been difficult but necessary. My meeting with the district attorney had gone as expected. The evidence of Amanda's financial abuse was overwhelming, and criminal charges were a real possibility. However, I had agreed to pursue civil remedies first if Amanda cooperated fully. To my surprise, she did. Perhaps facing potential criminal charges focused her mind wonderfully, or perhaps her parents' horror at her behavior had made an impact. Whatever the reason, within 2 weeks, my accounts had been fully reimbursed, with interest. Amanda had signed a formal acknowledgement of her actions and agreed to undergo financial counseling. David had moved out of the main house shortly after Amanda left, renting a small apartment downtown while he figured out his next steps. Their divorce was finalized 6 months ago. It was a clean break, with no children to consider and a marriage too damaged to repair. Amanda had moved to Phoenix for a fresh start, and David seemed relieved rather than heartbroken by her departure. The most meaningful change, however, was less visible. After Amanda's betrayal came to light, I found myself connecting with other seniors who had experienced similar financial abuse from family members. What began as casual conversations at my bank grew into a formal support group that now met weekly at the community center. We shared our stories, advised each other on protective measures, and provided emotional support through difficult family transitions. I had also reconnected with old friends who had felt unwelcome in my home during Amanda's residence. Nancy, my oldest friend from college, now joined me for weekly bridge games. My book club welcomed me back with open arms. I even started volunteering at the library again, reading to children during Saturday story hours. The doorbell of my guest house chimed, interrupting my reflections. I gathered my basket of roses and made my way to the front door. David stood on my porch, looking relaxed in casual weekend clothes. At 43, he resembled his father more than ever, though the past year had added a few strands of gray to his dark hair. Right on time, I greeted him, stepping back to let him in. I was just gathering flowers for the table. "Something smells amazing," he commented, following me to the kitchen where a pot of beef stew simmered on the stove. "Your father's recipe," I told him, arranging the roses in a simple glass vase. "I found his old recipe box last week and have been working my way through it. Dad's famous stew? Now I'm really glad I came over." David helped himself to a glass of water, comfortable in my space in a way he never would have been a year ago. Our relationship had required significant rebuilding after Amanda's departure. Weekly dinners had evolved into deeper conversations, painful but necessary explorations of how we had drifted apart, how he had failed to see Amanda's manipulation, how I had remained silent rather than risk confrontation. Gradually, those difficult conversations had given way to a new understanding, a more mature relationship based on mutual respect rather than obligation. "Grace should be here soon," I mentioned, referring to the woman David had been dating for the past 4 months. She texted that she's running a few minutes late. Grace was everything Amanda wasn't. Straightforward, kind, respectful. A third-grade teacher with a warm laugh and sensible shoes. She treated me not as a competitor for David's attention or an obstacle to be managed, but as a person worthy of consideration in my own right. The first time she asked my opinion on a book she was reading, I nearly wept from the simple acknowledgement of my thoughts having value. "She's bringing dessert," David said, leaning against the counter. "Some kind of apple crumble her grandmother used to make." I smiled, knowing how much that gesture would have meant to Frank, who had valued family traditions above all else. "How's the therapy going?" I asked, keeping my tone casual. After the divorce, David had started seeing a counselor to understand how he had become complicit in Amanda's behavior. Initially reluctant, He had gradually embraced the process, discovering patterns in his own behavior that needed addressing. Good. Really good, actually. He ran a hand through his hair, that familiar gesture that always reminded me of Frank. We've been talking a lot about boundaries lately. How I never established any with Amanda. How I let her steamroll over you. Over both of us, really. You've come a long way, I acknowledged, meaning it. The David of a year ago would never have recognized his own role in the dysfunction, would have placed all blame on Amanda while absolving himself. I have a long way to go still, he admitted. But Grace is patient, and she's really clear about what she needs, which helps. The doorbell rang again, and David went to answer it. I heard Grace's warm greeting, followed by their quiet laughter in the entryway. When they entered the kitchen together, I was struck by how natural they looked side by side. Not the flashy, picture-perfect couple David and Amanda had been, but something more genuine, more grounded. "Joe, these apples came from my sister's orchard upstate," Grace said, setting a fragrant dessert on the counter. "I thought you might appreciate the difference from store-bought." "That's so thoughtful," I responded, genuinely touched by her consideration. "Frank always said you could taste the care that went into homegrown produce." "He sounds like a wise man," Grace commented, helping me set the dining table without being asked. "David's been telling me more about him lately." We settled around my small dining table, the same one that had been in my family for 45 years. I had insisted on bringing it to the guest house, despite David's offer to buy me a new one. Some things were too precious to replace, carrying the weight of memories in their worn surfaces and gentle scars. As we shared our meal, the conversation flowed easily between us. Grace described a challenging student who had finally made a breakthrough in reading. David talked about the promotion he was being considered for at work. I shared stories from my support group, how we had helped a recently widowed man recover funds from a predatory caregiver. "Have you heard anything more from Amanda?" Grace asked, during a lull in the conversation. It was a measure of how far we had come that the question didn't bring immediate tension to the table. David shook his head. "Not directly. Her mother called last month to let me know she's engaged again. Some real estate developer in Scottsdale. I hope she's found whatever she was looking for," I said, surprised to discover I meant it. The anger that had once burned so brightly had faded to a dull ember, occasionally flaring when I remembered specific humiliations, but mostly just providing perspective on how far I had come. "She sent me a letter," I admitted. Something I hadn't shared with David yet. A real one, handwritten. Not quite an apology, but an acknowledgement of the pain she caused. She's in therapy too, apparently. David looked surprised. "When did this happen?" "About a month ago." I didn't respond, but I appreciated the gesture. I served the apple crumble Grace had brought, the sweet cinnamon aroma filling the small dining area. Sometimes it's enough just to know someone recognizes the harm they've done, even if they can't fully make amends. After dessert, we moved to the small patio outside my guest house. The summer evening was perfect, warm but not uncomfortably so, with fireflies beginning to appear in the gathering dusk. From here, we could see the main house, now filled with new life and energy. The young couple renting it had strung fairy lights along the porch, giving it a festive, welcoming appearance. "Do you ever miss it?" David asked, following my gaze to the house. "The main house, I mean." I considered the question carefully. I miss certain aspects of it, the memories, the familiarity, but this feels right for now. I gestured to my cozy guest house. It's the perfect size for me, easier to maintain, and knowing the house is providing income for my future gives me peace of mind. "You seem happy, Mom," David observed. "Happier than I've seen you in years." I am happy, I realized, somewhat surprised by the truth of it. Not despite everything that happened, but partly because of it. Standing up for myself changed something fundamental in how I see myself, how I move through the world. Grace nodded in understanding. Sometimes the most painful experiences lead to the most important growth. Exactly, I agreed. I spent too many years trying to accommodate others at the expense of my own needs, trying to keep the peace by remaining silent when I should have spoken up. I won't make that mistake again. The support group I had formed for elderly victims of financial abuse had expanded to include educational workshops at senior centers throughout the county. I had discovered a passion for helping others recognize warning signs I had missed, for empowering seniors to protect themselves and their assets. "Your mother is becoming quite the advocate," Grace told David. "The teachers at my school were talking about a presentation she gave last month. Very impressive." David smiled proudly. "I'm not surprised. Mom always was a fighter, even when she didn't realize it." As the evening wound down, David and Grace prepared to leave. At the door, David embraced me warmly. "Same time next week? I was thinking we could try that new Italian place downtown if you're interested." "I'd love that," I told him. "But let's have Grace choose. Your father always said a teacher's opinion was worth twice anyone else's." Grace laughed. "Your father sounds wiser by the minute." After they left, I returned to my patio to enjoy the last light of day. The main house glowed warmly in the distance, a family settling in for the evening in spaces once filled with my own family's laughter and tears. But it didn't bring sadness as it once might have. Instead, I felt a sense of continuity, of life flowing onward as it should. The painful lessons of Amanda's betrayal had ultimately led me to this peaceful place. I had learned that standing up for yourself isn't selfish, but necessary. That true strength often emerges only when we're pushed to our limits. That family bonds, while precious, must be based on mutual respect rather than blind loyalty. Most importantly, I had discovered that it's never too late to reclaim your power, to insist on dignity in how others treat you. At 69, I had found a new chapter in life, one defined not by loss or betrayal but by wisdom, self-respect, and genuine connection. As darkness fell completely, I made my way back inside my cozy guest house. On the mantel sat a photograph of Frank and me on our 40th anniversary, both of us gray-haired but beaming with the deep satisfaction of a life well shared. Beside it stood a newer photo of David, Grace, and me at a recent community fundraiser, all three of us laughing at some forgotten joke. "We did okay, Frank," I whispered to the empty room. "Not perfect, but okay." I thought he would have approved of where I had landed after the storm, of the boundaries I had drawn and the peace I had found. Sometimes losing what you thought you needed helps you find what you truly deserve. In my case, it had taken a disastrous birthday party to show me that I deserved so much more than I had been settling for. As I prepared for bed that night, I felt truly at home, not because of where I was living, but because I had finally come home to myself. Have you ever had to stand up to someone who was taking advantage of you? How did you find the courage to draw that line? Please comment below with your experiences. I know many of us face similar challenges with family dynamics. And if you found this story meaningful, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear this message. Thank you for listening. And remember, it's never too late to reclaim your dignity and find peace on your own terms.